Welcome back to Parley, the show where you folks support the other stuff I make by asking me to discuss the topic of your choice for $9 a month. This month, EyePatchNotes has chosen lyrical narratives, a pretty interesting topic, the idea of communicating a story using song, lyrics. EyePatchNotes says, may I request a discussion on lyrical narratives? You most certainly may. Certain forms of music have just as much capacity for stories as movies or TV. These stories can take advantage of rhymes or synonyms or even the linear nature of music itself. Some music buildcraft questions, of course. What are the recurring elements or themes from verse to verse? How do instrumentalization and backup vocals evolve over time? And when do the choruses vary, if at all? I will kind of generally address these, but it sounds like EyePatchNotes, this parlay is meant to be more general, and you're not actually specifically asking these exact things only. You've got an example for us. Featuring same-day conspicuous CG, EyePatchNotes thought it was a good idea at the time to make this graphic. Yes, so this is, after listening to the song, this is a representation of the choruses of this piece of music you've given as an example. We're going to talk about it right now. Mealy's In Hell We Live Lament, the promotional duet for upcoming game Limbus Company, showcases several callbacks in its two-chorus showing. The chorus happens 2 times in this song. At the climax, the following lyrics are broken up by a back and forth between the 2 vocalists. These are the white lyrics. So you see there's a set of if ones, 3 of them at the top, and then some why ones later on. We get the if ones kind of reprised the second time. Read as a story, EyePatchNotes says, we can see that each if and why lines up to form a complete question. So again, you can see at the second half of the clock, the lower half, the if ones are repeated from the beginning of the song, and then there's the why ones, and they connect to form sentences. If you wanted us to pretend like we're civilized humans, why do you crown the most violent to be champions, for example? This dynamic is used in the previous chorus too, which itself had the each loop we live through and each loop we die through lines repeated and changed. So you can see how the song is, I'm going to get into this when I start answering the question more properly, but just quickly, you can see how the song is, while you might read those lyrics as very literal, they're being associated in a way that I would say it's like more experiential. The lyrics are presented in such a way as to not really show or tell. You kind of are meant to feel the process. For example, in the song, the lyrics about looping are repeated once. That's what the red and blue vocal lines are. The 2 different vocalists in this song, repeat each one. I'm not going to actually play you this song, although I will, of course, link it in the description, like I generally do for this kind of parlay. But it would just be a lot to play the whole song, and this video will get copyright striked, and it's not good. Lastly, EyePatchNotes concludes, some of the song's strongest themes are used when the listening experience is at its busiest. Interesting. Having 4 distinct audio tracks between the 2 vocalists, intensified instrumentalization, and pseudo-Italian background chanting. Compared with the first half, this finale is an appropriate evolution of the presented ideas. And then there's a spoilered out part. Now, I'm going to talk about what I have to say so far, because there's a lot. So, again, a general discussion of storytelling, narrative storytelling in music, using lyrics to tell a story. I want to start with that point that I mentioned at the top. A lot of lyrics can be quite literal. I think the thing about music lyrics is that reading them, it might be a bit silly. I personally believe that music lyrics have very little in common with poetry. I believe they're often, I think, misunderstood as being poetry. Now, people do make songs out of basically poems. Like you can do that could be fine. Let's at least say that there is kind of a separate approach to music that I would say is quite squarely what we're discussing in this parlay, that really doesn't bear many similarities to poetry. It's not really about, I would say, like metaphor or like showing, not telling a beautiful picture. I would interpret this type of lyrical storytelling as, well, it's very literal, but not necessarily by literally just telling you the thing. Often, I was trying to explain before, I feel like this kind of lyrical storytelling uses it kind of gives you the experience of the thing. If something is meant to be looping, they literally repeat the thing. That might sound very literal, and they might say loop, but it kind of gives you the experience of, you feel like you were in that song. I could give a lot of examples of this off the top of my head. I'm going to talk a little bit about anime opening themes, which I'm really, really into. This is a huge pastime of mine. I really, really like a lot of the music that starts a lot of different anime. I have a lot of my music collection is, anime opening themes. And something I'd like to bring up with this idea of like the chorus repeating is how, so if you're not familiar, when an anime has a song as its opening theme, generally they play a verse and a chorus, fairly often kind of edited for the show. They're not going to play the whole song, but a lot of them are, moderately long. We're talking about a 1.5 minute thing, right? And the visual quality of anime opening themes is a topic for another time, but they often kind of present, if you had to summarize, like an archetypical example of the show, or something very useful you can do with an opening theme. You might think it's just kind of filler or whatever. Sure, but one thing they can do that can be effective is give you kind of the daily life that will not be present in the show of the characters, sort of, or kind of reprise, in the quiet moments between episodes off screen, this is what the characters were doing. A really good example of a show that does that is the Magi series, Labyrinth of Magic, Kingdom of Magic, Adventures of Sinbad, that whole thing. Those opening themes, if you want to go watch them, the Magi ones, have fine music and everything. This is not particularly a highlight for me, but you can see in the imagery that they're kind of displaying our three leads thinking about each other as they're separate a lot of the time, or struggling with their personal character arc things. That's a pretty common one, which isn't something that the show belabors during its actual runtime. It's something we're just reminded of during the opening themes. The reason I explain all that is that I think that a lot of lyrical storytelling does something similar. It's kind of meant to present an archetype of the thing. We're not telling you every beat of the story. We're trying to give you, maybe you could say, the ambiance of what the event that is being described is like. Does that make sense? Now, some poetry does do that, of course. But I would say that the interesting thing about lyrical storytelling, this song you gave as an example, for example, is that it's saying very literally a very abstract thing. It's almost like elevator pitching what's going to happen. It's interesting that this song, songs like this in general, are a relatively common way to kind of provide a trailer for a game, because I feel like that does relatively effectively, or it could relatively effectively paint the picture of what that game world will be like. I doubt that most games do that very accurately, but the idea that a game would have kind of a music-focused trailer that gives you the ambiance of the game makes sense in theory. A really good example of this being misused are all those League of Legends cinematics. Extremely cool. Maybe I should say music videos. Go watch them. I don't know, like Rise. Look up League of Legends Rise. It'll come right up. It's got 2 gajillion views. Very cool and everything. Playing League of Legends isn't like that at all, even a little, but the mood of the music depicts what you wish it was like. Let's say it that way. And so I would say, like, if you were to take that and say, oh, this is hype, let's make a game that like is this. That's a great idea. League of Legends just isn't that game, I would argue. League of Legends detractor over here, but anyhow, I hope that's a good example. And I think that is a way in which, again, like, you can look at lyrics like this and say, they can be a bit much. They're pretty on the nose. They sound really edgy. I think that a lot of games are like, if this is the mood that the game is setting, it's not like a lot of games aren't like this, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. it's a bit unfair to these lyrics to present them this way. Nothing wrong with you, EyePatchNotes. Just to say, like, for the sake of analysis, I think that when analyzing lyrical storytelling, we need to give the lyrics a break a little bit. They were never intended to be used in this form, and unlike poetry, just looking at the words really doesn't accomplish the thing that these were written to do. In fact, I would go so far as to say that language is kind of not the point of lyrical storytelling. You often don't even easily follow the words in a song, even if the song is in the language you understand. The lyrics are there just sort of to be an emblem or to invoke the thing, almost like magic in some magical ethos where you say a magic word and then a thing happens. It's not that the magic words are absolutely literally the thing happening exactly, or maybe they are like extremely on the nose magic incantations, and then you say a phrase at the end and the magic happens. Tons of different kinds of magic work that way in fiction, and I feel like lyrics are like that. You know, thinking about them, it's like, huh? Like, you're literally just saying the thing, but the point is that it's said in the context of, you know, this event that is being depicted, that we're getting the ambiance for. I hope that makes sense. I think that's really interesting about lyrics, lyrical narrative. If you want to write your own music lyrics, I would say, like, maybe don't be intimidated. If you melodically sing the thing and, you know, the lyrics line up with it, you can evoke your feeling. I would say it's just mostly about the music. Like, the words are very secondary. To get back to something you specifically asked, at the beginning, I think that the place where the words really matter is actually much more in the cadence of the writing, a place where lyrics again begin to resemble poetry a little more. That is, this song is pretty fast-paced and pretty bleak, and so the words are, you know, they might be, you would say, edgy concepts, but you'll notice that the verbiage, there's no like fancy words in here, right? It would make no sense. Like, why, you know? It's meant to be blunt in a way, or bleak, and it is. And so the verbiage is shorter, not just to avoid being highfalutin, but also because these words are short. They're staccato. You get this rapid fire series of syllables. I actually thought the Italian chanting, you can see in italic near my head here in white, the Italian chanting in the background, very strange because it doesn't have that effect. But it's kind of a background thing. If that was the focus, it would give the song a very different mood. It might put it a bit over the top for some people. I think that this type of music, darker sounding music, bleak music, you might say, that has more highfalutin terminology in it, sounds maybe Gothic or Victorian in style, or it evokes like a lot of vampire media does that. Weirdly like classified, classiness-ified, not classified by the government. I don't know what's going on with me in words today. It matters a lot what the type of verbiage used in the lyrics is. That's the point. Let's just evacuate from that whole topic, just like my brain did a few minutes ago. I also wanted to get into this idea that like the words themselves may not even be entirely necessary. Now, when I listened to this song to prepare for this parlay, closed captions were not on YouTube, but the song actually comes with them. Like the video has them embedded in it, you know. And that's interesting because, again, like it may be difficult to understand them even if they're in your language. Something that I like that I've talked about before is a phenomenon in games, in video games, but also in music for me, is that sometimes obscuring the meaning of the words or the lyrics can kind of help. Like my example is Genshin Impact. I think that a lot of the things said in Genshin Impact are cringeworthy. That is my critical statement, the hill I'm dying on, apparently, about this game that I've played a ton of. And the fact that they are layered behind Japanese, that I use the Japanese voiceover, which, like, I'm probably a beginner to intermediate student of Japanese. Like, I understand, more than 50% of what they're saying. I have studied a little Japanese and spent a lot of time listening to Japanese voices. I know enough Japanese that it's not like I have no idea what is being said, but you see what I'm trying to say? Like, it's not comfortable for me. It's not the same as if you said, official in Genshin Impact. If you said half the stuff she said to me in English, I would be unable to suppress laughter because it's just so absolutely absurd. And veiling it behind a language I don't understand as well has an effect that I am not sure how to feel about. I don't like that I am saying that ignorance is having a positive effect on my enjoyment of the thing. But I am being honest. That is an experience I have. I'm not sure what to say about that. I'm just going to leave that there for now. Something I've been thinking about a lot. But in music, I think this is because I don't really care about the lyrics that much. It's not because I don't understand them, and I'd be upset if I did. It's that even when I do understand the lyrics of music I'm listening to, they are simply secondary, in my opinion. Again, almost more like magic words to evoke ambiance, and it's really their rhythm that has more of an effect, in my opinion. To use Japanese as an example, a topic I'm pretty interested in is Japanese rap. Because Japanese, the syllabary in Japanese, the number of sounds, is very small. So when you rap in Japanese, it's extremely easy to rhyme. I would almost argue rhyming becomes a little secondary as per se. Having the end of your sentence have the same ending as the previous sentence, there's like maybe 6 total ending sounds in all of Japanese. Whereas in English, there, is maybe a couple thousand or something, right? So the meaning of having just the end of a sentence rhyme in Japanese is essentially gone. But that doesn't mean people don't do it. In my, limited novice at listening to Japanese rap experience, it means you turn it up to 11. There's like next level amounts of alliteration. You think that that's normal in rap in general. You ain't seen nothing yet. You can have, the same ending sound in every word if you want to, relatively easily, which is really interesting. That creates a very different dynamic. And it creates a feel, a different rhythm. Rhymes really create a flow in music, and making it relatively easier to rhyme essentially every word rather than the end of every sentence is a really good way to have a fly flying in front of your face while you're trying to answer a parlay, is a really good way to sort of dissolve regular rhythm. A really interesting thing that's common in rap music in general, as far as I have been exposed to it, is kind of interrupting the normal time signature of the song with the flow of the lyrics. So in other words, I can't give you an example because I can't rap to save my life, but if you look at the lyrics in this song, a lot of the lines, even without having heard it sung, you can see like they're a pretty set length, right? They're generally like the amount of talking in a measure in this song. You can see just by looking at the words in English is likely quite regular. If you listened to this song, you would be unsurprised to find that, about the same amount of each measure has talking in it, you can just kind of see that, which does help give the song some rhythm. A kind of underrated aspect of vocals is how they provide some percussion for a song, at least in certain singing styles. I think usually, but not always, I suppose. And it's a lot easier to disrupt that while making things still flow together if like literally everything ends with the same sound, like you're alliterating to the end of the earth. I just think that's very interesting. It creates, in rap, a sort of conversationality that is quite signature to rap music. And I think that effect allows you to create something that's like a song, but which the experience of listening to it isn't the same as just listening to some other music. It feels like you're listening to a conversation that someone is having, or when two people cipher with each other, or a group of people. It sounds more like, they're having a conversation in this interesting syncopated rhythm, rather than it being, the hallmarks of a normal piece of sing-song music. And I think you can do that to manipulate, again, the thing I said at the beginning, the experience of listening to the music, making it feel like, if this game is about looping over and over again through sort of purgatory realm. I have no idea if that's what this game is about, but from these lyrics, that's what, I don't know, read them. It sounds like there's gonna be some heaven or hell, and we're gonna be dying and coming. Is this a is this one of those games you get random upgrades and die and come back to life? Anyway, who knows? Sure, but the mood of the game, it would be very surprising if it wasn't, dark. I guess I would say it's a little unfair because, of course, I've seen the art on the YouTube video that has the song in it. You can go look at that if you want. But maybe I'll make that the thumbnail. Yeah, so I guess you will have seen that. But anyway, I don't think that really ruins anything. You would see it if you watch the song. Listen to the song. So I don't know. I think that's most of what I have to say about it. I just think it's interesting how music can use these. Again, I think like almost like the lyrics, when I say the lyrics are secondary, I hope I've demonstrated what I mean by that. It's not that the words don't matter, but I believe they're performing a very different purpose, a very different function than they are in other media. I think again, if when you read lyrics, it seems, you might even say unimaginative, how a lot of songs kind of repeat a motif. Once you've said the first couple lines, the if you'd wanted me to live, if you want me to forgive, like, do you really need to say both, right? But that's not what they're for, is I guess what I would argue. Like, the lyrics are not there. I feel like listening to the song with no lyrics, you don't even need them to say it once, let alone twice. The purpose is to just further invoke that idea. It's not that it was so unclear before they said it, Again, when I listen to a lot of music in Japanese, I don't feel like you're at a complete loss for what the meaning of the song is, even though you cannot understand the lyrics, right? And of course, as a weak student of Japanese, it's harder for me to understand sung vocals in a language I'm not as comfortable with. But you still get some idea of what the song is about. That's like one of the magical things about music. There's a universal language to it. I'm going to read EyePatchNotes' spoilered out part now. You said, whoa, perhaps by design, I swear I'm not making this up, EyePatchNotes can confirm. Anime intros and outros, EyePatchNotes says, liberally splice verses and choruses. Manually connecting a soft first verse with the intense final chorus can make a punctual impact given a hard window of 90 seconds. 90s, the 90s anime era is what I was thinking, of 90 seconds, the time of an anime opening. And for the viewers interested, the full studio version can be a wholly new experience at times. Oh my goodness, wow. I'm really happy that I put that in before revealing this spoiler part. Exactly, like what I was saying before, getting into a little before, is it's interesting how a lot of anime intros, they'll use their verse and chorus. A lot of the time, I said they would, maybe edit those a little for the opening. Not always, but sometimes. A really good example is one of the My Hero Academia openings, and I wish I knew what it was called. Maybe the second season one. The verse and chorus used are significantly modified since the rest of the song isn't there. What we're going to talk about for the end of this parlay is through composition, the practice of making your song less and less regular. That is less verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. Anyway, less like that. A really good example of an artist that has plenty of through composed music, if you're looking for it, is Silver Sun Pickups. Growing Old is Getting Old. That song is a great example of a rather through composed song. It doesn't lack all structure, but I would describe them as like, rather than building and then dropping and then building and then dropping and then building and then dropping, like a lot of songs do. These songs, through composed songs, will often build over their entire duration to a sort of crescendo. And I think that a lot of anime openings, you're right, EyePatchNotes, do a kind of middle ground there. They start way softer than they will eventually become, and they have about 90 seconds to sort of ramp that up. And they tend to use a lot of that time. Personally, I've also found that bridges are more popular. That is like a thing between the verse and the chorus that is like verse two Electric Boogaloo, verse 2.0, that builds, it bridges between the verse and the chorus, rather than the idea of a bridge being like the part where there's a guitar solo in the, 2/3 of the way through the song. Oh boy, there's a lot of stuff in this topic. I'm talking really quickly through all these things. But I will try to slow down because there's way too much for one sitting. We'll try to focus on this idea of right, like when you explore the full studio version, as iPatch said. A lot of the time I find that I don't like it. Like the song wasn't doing anything with that extra time, and a lot of the time I feel like it really is. Can I give you easy examples of these things? I mean, I don't know. But if you take a bunch of anime openings that you like or whatever, and then listen to the full versions, you'll find that some of them, a lot of different stuff happens, like in the part that isn't in the show. But then in others of them, almost as many as not, in my experience, it's really mostly a rehash of the part that is the opening two more times. And like that's the studio version. So I'm not sure it's really, you could say it overstays its welcome, maybe. I don't know. Some of them are so punchy, aggressive, pointed, jarring that you might not want them for 3 minutes. It might be better to have that nice slice and then you're out. So I don't know. I think that's very interesting. This song that you gave as an example has kind of again another middle ground, kind of a verse chorus, simple structure, but it does that thing, yeah, where it's just sort of a quieter version of the things at first, and then it progresses to be like the chaos at the end, which is a fun, it kind of builds over time. You have a kind of a 2.0 version of the verse chorus as the second half of the song, which is interesting. Not super uncommonly used, but an interesting technique to make it feel like there's narrative flow, like something is happening. You can kind of feel your characters or whatever progressing through this event, and then everything is popping off, and there's like the climax of the story. Maybe more like a book. Again, it doesn't have this sort of sing-song bup 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 that like the structure of a song has. It feels more like things building up to a climax, which itself is again an extremely abstract way to sort of mirror storytelling. It feels like that is more the overall experience of having read a book rather than going on a roller coaster. And so just by structuring the song that way, it maybe feels more like a story or like a narrative is being told than a song, even though it's using many of the same parts as before. So alongside other normal musical techniques, again, such as using the length of the words that are in the music, or changing up how much like a measure is interrupted, how much are the sentences in the song contained within a measure. That's often used in poetry. The rest of a sentence will be on the next line. Personally, I think a technique better suited to music where you feel that cadence at the end of the measure and then it kind of carries over. We could talk about music theory for this too. It's just way too much, so I'll contain myself. But yeah, that idea, like there's a lot of things you can do to just sonically make the audience member feel like they're progressing through, like, oh, there's a cliffhanger, like the moments of a plot in a book. There's a climax. There's a whole bunch of different tracks going off all of a sudden. There's multiple speakers, maybe. There's a back and forth between them, or are they competing? Is it one and then the other? Is there a kind of chorus in the background? I don't know. I just think I'm not sure I have a ton to say about all these techniques, but they are tools. There are many of these tools that let you make it even just feel more like a story. Exactly how you tell the story, in my opinion, I just don't think it's that effective. Not this song in particular, just lyrical narratives in general. What actually happened in the story? I don't know. A good example is Dream Theater. Dream Theater has a lot of relatively more in the direction of through composed music that is, the tracks are often really long. We're talking like 7 to 12 minutes. And they often are kind of a story, or they feel like a narrative arc. A really good example, or one that I like anyway, I think is an effective example, is The Count of Tuscany. Go listen to that by Dream Theater. And what you're going to experience is that by the end, you'll think, I was certainly told a story. What happens in the story? Well, I can tell you maybe one or two sentences. And I feel like I went on this long adventure, but I more got the feeling of going on the adventure, of going through the story. It's more like I experienced the story rather than I read the story. You see what I'm trying to say? And I don't think that's bad. It's just a different approach. If you read a book and are literally told the events of a story, but you didn't kind of viscerally feel it in that same way, is that really giving you a better idea of what happened? I just don't necessarily think so. I think the strength of a lyrical narrative is that it does not attempt to detail the events of the story. It's more about, I guess, ambiance, right? And so, while it might seem very literal, these lyrics in these types of songs, I think that they're there really only to evoke a feeling. And I would argue that rather than them telling, not showing, being maybe rather basic in that way, these lyrics, no, they're actually not even entirely necessary at all. You could take them away and still kind of feel it when the song has done its job well. They're just there to amplify or evoke the idea even more. I think that's all I've got. I think that's all the good stuff I have to say about this. EyePatchNotes, definitely I took a less directed approach. Just kind of talked about this subject for a little while. I hope that was okay. Hope it was good. This song is a really interesting example. I think it's pretty funny that we both had this similar thing about like anime, themes are very related to this topic in general. For whatever reason, I can't imagine why. It's almost like they're at the beginning of a story. Those songs chosen do often tell more of a story. A topic I would get into, like if there's a whole separate parlay that would be like, again, that thing I briefly touched on about how the opening theme of an anime, often using this sort of lyrical narrative focused track, will often do something to kind of complement the runtime of the show or the game. It can be done in games too, certainly, to give you the feeling of the thing having happened, even though it isn't going to be covered in the body of the show. Sometimes there'll be some contrast. A lot of the time, I think like a song that on its own I feel like meh about, and especially the visuals of the opening, that again on their own I feel like do a lot of work when in the context of the series as a whole. A simple example would be Summertime Rendering. That opening is pretty sparse, I'd argue. Maybe a touch slow effort, let's say. And the tone of the song isn't straightforwardly the tone of the show, but I believe that hearing that song and seeing that weird abstraction of the imagery, go watch Summertime Rendering. It's the first episode is a lot. You're not going to be bored, and you'll hopefully like it, and maybe not. I don't know. Go have fun. It's not exactly a dry first episode, in my opinion anyway. And the opening you'll hear in it, yeah, again, it just like it adds something to the ambiance of the show that the show has no time for. Like, we're not going to do that in the show. It's just kind of there. And there's really nothing about the song and the imagery in the opening on their own that do that. It's something about combining them. When I was in college, when I graduated college, what I did is it was called our capstone at my university. My final project that I had to do to graduate, I was meant to write a novella, and I was meant to write it taking inspiration from two other pieces. So I was meant to read two other works. I read Sphinx by Anne Garretta and Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. I've maybe mentioned this project before in Parley. Ooh. The light outside dimmed, so here we are. And I took some narrative device used in both works. From Anne Garetta's Sphinx, I took the obfuscation of gender, and Haruki Murakami's Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. So it's every other chapter is one story and then the other. Hard-Boiled Wonderland, End of the World. Hard-Boiled Wonderland, End of the World, basically. And the gimmick, as I identified it, and not in a bad way a gimmick, is that these stories kind of infect each other off the page. Having just read The End of the World, Hard-Boiled Wonderland changes. If you hadn't read that chapter before it, there's something about the fact that you just read something like this that evokes certain things, almost like having a taste on your palate and then you eat another food and they do a thing that modifies the text without actually putting something in it, allowing you to write a certain kind of story and make it a different way without actually changing anything about the things that you wrote. by sort of, again, kind of priming the audience a certain way. And I think that lyrical narrative and, again, these anime openings at their best, they do, the powerful thing they can do is that they can kind of, again, add or modify the thing around them, the game they're attached to, without actually doing anything to it, which is a very interesting technique. Oftentimes it's just not done. I mentioned My Hero Academia has that one opening that was an example of something else. That's an example of a show that I don't think does this much. The opening for My Hero Academia is what you would imagine an opening to a show called My Hero Academia would look like. There's a lot of superheroes doing their big moves. Now, I love the openings. They're extremely cool. I think they're super hype and badass, but they do not accomplish much. They're just really cool, I guess I would say. I do not think they provide good lyrical storytelling, except maybe, anyway, not as much as these other examples, okay? Enough about that topic. Yeah, I mean, again, like, rather than doing a whole parlay on that, that's most of what I have to say. I do think that's really interesting, but it's a little less directly related to the questions you asked, so I hope it was okay to include it at the end. Anyway, a really interesting question, really stretching those neurons. I hope I tackled it in an interesting way. And again, like, I tried to focus on the things I just have a lot to say about this topic, but I hope that was all right. It was a little less directed than normal. Thank you for the question.